Okay, so today on the deep dive, we're really jumping into some pretty challenging source material. Stuff that
Oh,
claims, well, a really dark, controversial history behind power.
absolutely. We're kind of setting aside the usual history books, diplomacy, political science.
Yeah, and diving headfirst into claims about secret societies, psychological engineering, even radical takes on ancient leaders. It's provocative stuff.
It really is. And we need to be upfront, right? The ideas here like systematic mind control, engineering fragmented minds, even creating multiple personalities and rulers on pious. This is way outside the academic mainstream.
Definitely.
So our mission today isn't about saying, yes, this absolutely happened. It's about unpacking these specific sources, really following their logic, and understanding exactly what they claim is the hidden story of how people rule successfully.
Exactly. Because this material, it challenges everything we think we know about good leadership. It argues that the rulers who lasted, who were truly powerful, their skills weren't empathy or morality or wisdom, not at all.
In fact, these sources argue the exact opposite, that the most effective rulers were often products of a deliberate, very cold, calculated psychological process.
Which leads us straight to the core idea, doesn't it?
It does. The central claim is that certain, let's say, high-level secret groups possess this hidden weapon. The sources flat out call it mind control.
And crucially, they don't just mean like good speeches or spin.
No, no, not just persuasion or clever politics. They mean a systematic process, a mechanism used to literally program specific individuals, to shape them into tools or weapons designed for the extreme pressure cooker of ruling or, deep espionage.
And the wildest part of this programming claim is why they supposedly do it. It's framed as intentionally creating multiple personalities, separate identities within one person.
Right, not as some unfortunate side effect of trauma like we might think of D today, but as a deliberate design choice, an architectural feature almost.
To make them resilient.
Exactly, to ensure maximum resilience and utility. The ultimate leader, in this view, isn't whole. They've been psychologically broken apart and then very carefully put back together piece by piece, making them almost immune to normal human pressures or emotional costs. Okay, so to really get into this, we have to sort of accept the source's premise for a moment. If mind control is the weapon, what does it do? Well, it creates this specific kind of psychological fragmentation, breaking the psyche apart.
And this fragmentation isn't random. It supposedly produces very specific traits.
Engineer traits, yeah. Traits that these sources argue are absolutely essential for holding on to serious power long term.
And like you said earlier, these traits are pretty much the opposite of what we'd value today. We talk about transparency, accountability.
hmm But this material says successful tyrants, emperors, the big players, they consistently show three core traits supposedly built into them.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is profound unpredictability. Think about it. In high-stakes politics or power struggles, if your enemies always know what you're going to do next,
You're finished. Yeah.
exactly, you become predictable, vulnerable.
Yep.
So this engineered unpredictability, it keeps rivals constantly guessing,
Yeah.
permanently off balance. It's about psychological dominance.
Okay, unpredictable. What's number two?
An extremely high stress tolerance. But this isn't just being tough or resilient in the way we normally mean.
How so?
The programming is meant to create total insulation. The leader has to be utterly unaffected by insane levels of pressure, huge decisions, nonstop public hate, even personal attacks.
Like truly unaffected, not just putting on a brave face.
According to this, yes.
Yeah.
They have to be able to watch their reputation get shredded or face massive military losses and just not internalize it. No real remorse, no deep personal suffering.
And the chilling. And the third trait.
The third one is maybe the hardest for us, morally, to grapple with. It's a complete lack of empathy.
Zero empathy.
The sources are blunt about this. Effective rule, especially absolute rule, demands focusing only on self-interest or the state's goals. No distractions. If a leader is always worrying about the human cost...
They hesitate. They compromise.
Exactly. Their ability to grab power and keep it is weakened. So in this system, ruthlessness isn't a flaw. It's a feature. It's deliberately built in.
Wow. Okay, so the recipe is unpredictability, total emotional shielding, and ruthlessness. But wait, here's my question. If you deliberately break someone's mind apart, wouldn't that make them unstable?
Yeah.
Like prone to cracking under pressure or maybe even being controlled by the controllers?
That's where the supposed sophistication of the engineering comes in.
Yeah.
The sources argue these three traits, unpredictability, stress tolerance, lack of empathy, they aren't really separate things.
Okay.
They all kind of fold into one single functional psychological state. Dissociation.
Okay, but we need a better definition of dissociation here than just, feeling like you're watching a movie. That seems too simple for this.
Absolutely. It's much more specific. The sources define this engineered dissociation as a highly refined skill, the ability to consciously detach your mind from your body, from what's happening right now, and crucially, from the moral memory of your own past actions,
So you can act, make huge decisions, order terrible things.
while maintaining this internal feeling that this isn't really happening to me, or maybe these actions are being done by a functional part, a tool, not my core self. That detachment is the goal of the programming. It creates a clean break between the ruler persona and the private self, assuming a private self even remains intact.
So the stability comes from compartmentalization. Like if one personality takes a hit, say through a betrayal.
Right. That alter or fragment can be sort of mentally quarantined or retired,
Yeah.
and a new undamaged persona takes over, maybe one specifically programmed for that kind of situation. It still have the resilience learned by the others.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the logic, however disturbing. The benefit of these engineered multiple personalities is layered then.
Exactly. First, the core leadership identity is protected from trauma, because trauma gets contained within a specific fragment. Second, like you said, they become incredibly hard to predict or manipulate.
Because an enemy spy or a court rival can only target the personality that's currently active.
Precisely. The one that's out. The other alters are safe, hidden, holding maybe crucial secrets or alternative strategies. The end result is a leader who's resilient, fundamentally unknowable, and basically a high-functioning political weapon built for one thing: ruthless power. Now, before we look at where this programming might have actually been used historically, we need to talk about why these ideas sound so out there to us today.
Right. Why is it so hard for a modern audience to even entertain these possibilities?
The source material argues it's because of huge shifts in how humanity basically perceives reality itself. Our whole modern worldview, they claim, is kind of set up to automatically dismiss concepts like this.
Okay, so let's trace that. The sources lay out these big transformations in how we understand the world, right? Showing how we moved away from a mindset that might have actually accepted psychic programming.
Yeah, they point to roughly three major shifts in our kind of religious or ontological framing. Very broadly, we started with ages dominated by mother goddess worship. Focus on cycles, fertility, nature, deep connection. That eventually gave way to polytheism. Multiple gods, often squabbling, each ruling different parts of life or nature. Think Greek myths, Norse myths.
Right.
And then finally, we see the rise of monotheism, centralizing spiritual power into one single, usually transcendent God.
But the sources say the really critical shift, the one that blinds us to mind control possibilities, wasn't just about the number of gods. It was about the relationship between mind and matter.
Exactly. This happened roughly around the Enlightenment, the rise of science. Before that, many ancient worldviews basically held that mind precedes matter,
Meaning.
meaning that consciousness wasn't just a product of the brain, it was fundamental. Maybe a cosmic mind, some kind of vibrating consciousness was the source of reality. It literally creates atoms, creates the world we see.
So in that view, reality itself is more fluid, subjective, maybe even programmable.
Precisely.
Mm.
Because consciousness is primary. If mind creates matter, then maybe minds can directly influence other minds, or even reality in ways we now think are impossible. External forces, gods, spirits, or even human programmers could potentially alter the self in fundamental ways.
And then science comes along and flips the script.
Completely. Modern science generally argues that the brain creates mind. Consciousness is just a complex side effect of brain chemistry, an epiphenomenon. It starts and ends inside your skull.
And the authors we're looking at say that view, the materialist view, traps us.
Yeah, they argue it creates a kind of cognitive cage. If the brain is the only source of self and consciousness, then ideas like, say, psychic fragmentation caused by external rituals or implanting memories from outside, well, they become nonsense.
Yeah.
Philosophically impossible.
They break the rules of cause and effect as we now understand them.
Right. Our own scientific paradigm basically programs us to reject the possibility of the kind of programming the sources describe.
It's like we made a trade-off. We moved away from seeing the world metaphorically, seeing unseen forces as active agents like gods or spirits, to seeing it only literally. If you can't measure it, weigh it, replicate it in a lab, then it's just not real. It's superstition, myth, maybe cultural storytelling. but not actual.
And tied to that is the shift away from intuition,
Hmm.
right? Trusting your gut, your
Mm.
direct perception, what your eyes and heart tell you.
Towards counterintuitive rationalism. We're trained now to trust the data, the abstract model, the complex theory, even when it contradicts our direct experience. If the math doesn't fit the observation, well, maybe the observation was flawed.
So this constant downgrading of intuition makes us less able to even recognize, let alone accept, sophisticated control methods that aren't purely physical or chemical. That's the argument. So when we hear a claim like Egyptian pharaohs underwent programmed dissociation, our modern rational mind doesn't just think that's unlikely. It thinks that's structurally impossible. But someone operating in a mind precedes matter world. They might have just seen it as, advanced spiritual engineering, a practical application of how consciousness works. Okay, so if Egypt potentially used this extreme, personalized psychological control on its pharaoh, how did other early societies keep millions of people in line? We need to contrast the alleged pharaoh programming with the broader methods used for mass social control.
That's a really important distinction. We're shifting from the potentially hidden psychic manipulation of one person, the ruler, to the big, visible systems needed to manage entire populations.
Right, and the sources give a pretty neat comparison of how the four earliest large-scale societies tackled this problem of population control. Each found a different solution.
Let's walk through them. Where do we start?
Let's start with China. Their solution was brilliant in a way: control through a highly structured, merit-based bureaucracy.
Not military might, primarily.
Not primarily. The strategy was to build this incredibly robust civil service. Stability came from a fixed intellectual hierarchy. The key was the civil service exam system. You can still see echoes in exams like the Gaokao today.
Those incredibly difficult exams.
Exactly. They demanded years, decades of intense study, memorization, and basically intellectual loyalty to the state's ideology and structure. It created a governing class, the Mandarins, who were competent, unified by this shared ordeal, and completely dependent on the state for their position. Control through structure, education, rules.
Okay, China. Bureaucracy. Who's next?
Let's look at the Indus Valley Civilization, the IVC. This one's fascinating because of what's missing.
What's missing?
Archaeologically, there's not much evidence of huge armies, massive fortifications, or grand royal palaces like you see elsewhere. It suggests their main method for keeping society together was different. Probably religion.
A religion focused on...
It seems likely it promoted ideas of equality, peace, nonviolence. Concepts like dharma focusing on internal spiritual discipline rather than external force. This created a kind of self-regulating social structure.
So control wasn't top-down from a king with an army, but more, built into the culture, internalized.
Seems that way. Social harmony came from shared beliefs and philosophical goals that discouraged conflict. It's a system that relies on people believing in it and regulating themselves. You see foundations there for later traditions like Buddhism, managing millions through shared values, not state coercion.
Interesting. Okay, that's two. What about Mesopotamia?
Mesopotamia is almost the opposite. Think Sumer, Babylon, Assyria. Their geography was wide-open plains, no great natural defenses like Egypt's deserts or China's mountains.
So easy to invade.
Constantly, which meant their control mechanism pretty much had to be warfare. Persistent external threats forced them to become highly unified, militaristic societies.
So control came from the need to fight.
Exactly. Cohesion was forged in battle. The state demanded absolute loyalty, quick mobilization. The justification for everything, social structure, taxes, the king's power, was defense and conquest. They used outward aggression to create internal unity. Society served the military machine.
Bureaucracy, religion, warfare. That brings us to Egypt.
Right, Egypt. Their method for mass control was unique again. Divine kingship.
The pharaoh as a god.
Not just like a god or chosen by the gods. The pharaoh was believed to be a literal, living god on earth. Horus walking among them. Later Osiris too.
And that belief was the control mechanism.
Absolutely. It elevated the ruler so far beyond ordinary humans that questioning him, let alone resisting him, was basically unthinkable. It would be like questioning the sun rising. This made the specific psychological state of that one individual, the pharaoh, absolutely critical. The stability of the entire civilization rested on him being seen as divine and in control.
Which brings us right back to why someone might want to ensure that pharaoh was psychologically optimized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your entire civilization's stability, its connection to the cosmic order, Ma'at, rests on the identity of one person, you probably don't leave the creation of that identity to chance.
Right. You'd want a system.
And this is where the sources argue the mind control techniques, the dissociation programming, were actually put into practice, hidden in plain sight within the most ancient and sacred rituals.
Okay, so how? What was the mechanism? The sources make a really interesting point about Egyptian mythology compared to others, right?
They do. They argue that, say, Greek myths often function as stories. They explore human nature, morality, the gods' flaws. But Egyptian myths, the cycles involving Ra, Osiris, Horus, so they function less like traditional stories and more like scripts.
Scripts, meaning they were meant to be acted out.
Precisely. A script implies performance, a set sequence of actions, a ritual. And because the pharaoh was considered the living embodiment, the reincarnation of these very gods,
You had to act them out.
he was compelled to, year after year, participating in these detailed, specific, recurring reenactments of the myths.
And the sources claim this wasn't just symbolic. This constant reenactment was the programming.
That's the core claim. By ritually embodying the gods, the pharaoh wasn't just remembering a story. He was supposedly internalizing their memories, their struggles, their divine powers and perspectives. He was, in effect, literally becoming the identities laid out in the mythic cycle. It's presented as the mechanism for installing those internal divine altars we talked about.
Okay, can we look at specific examples? How would this work?
Let's take two key ones. First, the cycle of Ra, battling the serpent Apep or Opthis in some texts.
Ra, the sun god, travels through the underworld every night.
And every night he has to fight off this giant serpent of chaos, Apep, to make sure the sun can rise again the next morning. The fight is eternal, the victory never final, only the struggle is guaranteed.
So the pharaoh reenacts this.
Yes. And by doing so, the theory goes, he internalizes the need for constant, tireless effort to maintain cosmic order, Malad, against the ever-present threat of chaos, Isfet. It programs endurance. It programs the conviction that the struggle never ends. It forces the ruler to operate on this relentless divine rhythm, insulated from merely human weariness. It builds that extreme stress tolerance.
Okay, that covers endurance. But what about the multiple personalities idea, the fragmentation?
For that, the most powerful example is the central myth of Osiris and Set. This, the sources argue, is the literal script for fracture and rebuilding.
Remind us of the basics of that story.
Osiris is the good king. He brings civilization. His jealous brother, Set, tricks him, murders him, and then cuts his body into pieces, usually 14 pieces, scattering them across Egypt.
Gruesome.
Very. Then his wife, the powerful goddess Isis, searches tirelessly, finds all the pieces except one, magically reassembles them, and conceives their son Horus. Osiris becomes ruler of the underworld, and Horus goes up to battle Set and eventually reclaim the throne of Egypt.
So the pharaoh reenacts being murdered and dismembered.
Virtually, yes. And then being painstakingly put back together. The sources interpret this systematic reenactment, their repeated performance of being broken apart and rebuilt, as a precise, sophisticated form of psychological programming.
How does that work psychologically?
The ritual enactment becomes a kind of controlled trauma, followed by guided reconstruction. The dismemberment part is the necessary fracturing of the original baseline human identity, breaking it down.
Okay.
Then the detailed, painful reassembly by the priests, who act as Isis, is the programming step. This is where new components, the divine attributes, the memories, the unbreakable will of the resurrected Osiris, the focused vengeance of Horus, are supposedly inserted and integrated into the psyche.
So the goal isn't a single stable personality, it's a deliberately fragmented system.
Exactly. Where the ruling personality, the Horus aspect, is equipped with the specific dissociative resilience and divine authority learned through the programmed memories of Osiris's death and rebirth and Ra's endless fight.
It creates a ruler who can separate self from action, like we discussed, who can be ruthless because part of him is the vengeful Horus, another part is the enduring Ra.
That's the interpretation. The entire religious foundation of the culture becomes, in this view, a giant, ongoing psychological training program, designed over centuries to create the perfectly detached, divinely sanctioned, high-functioning political weapon needed to keep the whole system running. They weren't just worshiping gods, they were trying to build them inside a human host.
Okay, we've covered the psychological goals, dissociation, resilience. We've looked at the historical context, different methods of control, and the proposed mechanism Egyptian myth as ritual programming script. Now we need to tie it all together with the biggest claim, that this isn't just about controlling a leader's mind, but controlling their reality.
Right. And this brings us back to philosophy, specifically to Immanuel Kant. His ideas about how we perceive the world are crucial here.
Kant's big distinction was between the noumena and the phenomena, right?
Exactly. Kant argued that we humans are fundamentally limited. We can never know reality as it truly is, in its absolute essence. That's the thing in itself. It's inaccessible to us.
Because our senses, our brains, they act like filters. We don't get raw reality.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We only ever experience the world through those filters. What we perceive is the phenomenon of the world, as it appears to us, structured by our minds, our senses.
And this is the philosophical key to the mind control claim.
It's the bedrock. If we accept Kant's point that objective reality, the noumena, is fundamentally unknowable, then what defines the reality we actually live in, our functional subjective reality?
It has to be. Well, what we can access, our perceptions, our thoughts, and critically, our experiences and memories.
Exactly. The sum total of what you remember happening, what you believe you've experienced, that constitutes your reality. Whether it perfectly matches some objective truth out there is almost irrelevant to how you live and make decisions.
If I remember being burned by fire, fire is dangerous for me in my reality.
Perfect example. That memory shapes your future actions, your emotions about fire. It defines that part of your world. So, the sources argue the ultimate form of power isn't just controlling armies or gold. It's controlling the very framework of reality for key individuals.
Which leads to the final staggering implication of this alleged mind control.
If your subjective reality is built entirely from your personal memories and experiences, then the power to control memory and experience is, functionally speaking, the power to control reality itself for that person.
Can you give an example of how that might work in this context, like for the programmed pharaoh?
Okay, imagine a pharaoh needs to do something ruthless but politically necessary. Let's say eliminate a powerful rival from the court. The programmers, according to this theory, wouldn't just order him to do it. That might cause conflict, hesitation.
Right.
Instead, they might use these ritualistic, dissociative techniques to implant a memory. Maybe a vivid memory where the pharaoh recalls catching the rival in an act of treason. Or perhaps they ritually enact the rival's execution beforehand, creating a memory of it already being done.
So inside the pharaoh's head, the execution isn't a future decision with moral weight.
Exactly. It's already justified by the implanted memory of treason, or it feels like something that has, in a sense, already occurred within the ritual reality. The action aligns perfectly with the political need because the leader's internal history, their subjective reality, has been rewritten to support it.
Wow. That reframes this entire thing. It's not just about making someone tough or obedient. It's about building their entire operating system.
That's the ultimate claim. The highest level of control isn't brute force. It's meticulous psychological architecture. Creating a ruler who lives, breathes, and acts entirely within a reality script provided by their programmers. Hashtag outro, key takeaways, and final thought.
Well, this has been quite the journey. A really provocative deep dive into source material that forces you to look at power, history, and even consciousness in a totally different, maybe unsettling light. Let's just quickly recap the main takeaways for you.
Yeah, first we dug into that radical claim that the most successful, enduring leaders aren't defined by virtue, but often by an engineered psychological profile. Traits like unpredictability, detached self-interest, and incredible stress tolerance, all stemming from managed, intentional dissociation.
Second, we explored the theory that ancient myths, particularly those Egyptian cycles involving Osiris, Set, Ra, they weren't just stories. They were potentially ritual scripts, meticulously designed for the lifelong psychological programming of rulers, fracturing and rebuilding their identity for political ends.
And finally, we connected all this to that profound philosophical idea, borrowing from Kant. If our reality is fundamentally shaped by our memories and experiences, then controlling those memories is, in a very real sense, controlling reality itself for the individual involved.
It's a truly startling way to interpret history, isn't it? It makes you reconsider the actions, the detachment, the sheer conviction of certain figures throughout time. But as always, we want to leave you with a final thought, something to chew on after this.
Right. If these sources, even if they're extreme, hold even a grain of insight about what it takes to achieve and maintain absolute power, if that effectiveness really does lie in detachment, in being unburdened by empathy, and if that state is best achieved through a fractured, engineered identity, what does that truly say about the price of power?
Yeah.
And maybe, bringing it closer to home, we have to ask, how much of our own modern emphasis on resilience, our ability to be strong, compartmentalize trauma, just move on from difficulties, how much of that is just a more subtle, socially acceptable form of dissociation? Is our celebrated ability to detach sometimes less about psychological strength and more about becoming a more efficient tool, whether for a political system, an economy, or it's something else entirely?
Yeah.
It really makes you question what resilience truly means.